Okay, so today is about a decision framework, and our goal here is how do you know when you're ready for a major system implementation and when you're not? So this talk is supposed to be about 45 minutes. You can drop questions to us. Today we have Simon Timms, our solutions architect, and he leads complex system design and integrations across startups and enterprise environments. He spends his time translating messy operational reality into systems that actually scale. And today he'll walk us through the net readiness framework. We also have Todd Wood, our product developer. He is focused on practical automation and measurable efficiency gains. He works in the weeds, identifying bottlenecks, reducing friction, and turning manual workflows into structured systems. He'll share a concrete example on how profit gets uncovered in real operations. And then Andy Seymour, our CEO and co-founder, has led major system implementations across a range of industries. He focuses on aligning technology investment with business outcomes, not just technical delivery. And he'll provide strategic context as we move through the discussion. So I'm going to share my screen now with our deck. And we can jump right in. Simon?
I think we're going to let you introduce us more often. That was pretty awesome.
I am very impressed with myself.
Okay, so, feel free to add in questions as we go. We should be able to see them.
So we at Inventive have launched a number of complicated systems over the years, and hoping that the people in our audience have perhaps done the same thing too. And we have seen terrible problems when launching major systems. So we were often brought in to rescue projects or take a look at where projects have slipped on their timelines. And the fact is that when you're deploying a major system, it is a lot of work. There is a lot of risk behind it, and there are a lot of unknowns out there, to use a phrase that is popular. So we see problems with budgets being missed, timelines being missed, and of course, scope expanding. It is so very tempting as a business to go, oh, well, we've got this cool new feature that does X. I wish it did Y as well. And then delay the deployment of the system until it can do Y as well. And eventually you get down 6 months later and you're well into the weeds, and now you don't know what is stopping the deployment of the project or what is pushing you forward. And it just becomes very confusing to launch major systems. This is a problem that everybody sees out there. In this talk, we're going to cover a bunch of different things. What projects succeed that we see working well and get out there on time, and what is the difference between those projects and the ones that stall out and take a long time or end up never going to production. We're going to talk about the spectrum of technology investment, how you can spend as little or as much as you want on a project, and where you start to see diminishing returns on that. We're going to talk about when you're ready to actually deploy your system into production. So we call that the readiness test. And then we're going to get into what has changed pretty dramatically in the last, say, 18 months with the advent of AI and coding agents and Claude, and, well, really everything that's changed. And then we're finally going to take a little bit of a look at how to prove the value of your system before putting too much money into it and scaling it up. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about is just the scaling tension. So this is why we need to look at scaling the applications that people are using. So most businesses start with a spreadsheet when they're building out their business, and spreadsheets are probably the single greatest application on anybody's computer for businesses. They provide so much value, and they are able to scale a business just amazingly up to a certain point. So at some point out there, spreadsheets start to become problematic, and people will add on to spreadsheets and try and break through the limitations of a spreadsheet. So we often come in and see people who have incredibly complicated operations inside of their spreadsheets, macros which are going out and reading files off of disks and bringing them into spreadsheets and merging and splitting. And it becomes a bottleneck and it becomes very fragile. Excel is a great tool, but boy, if you've ever been dropped into one of these complicated spreadsheets, it is so hard to figure out what those spreadsheets are doing and what people have done over the course of 10 or 15 or 20 years in that spreadsheet. I mean, that's the amazing thing about Excel is that if you open a spreadsheet from 1995, it will still work as if it was 1995. So that has allowed people to have these 30-year-old spreadsheets. And so that's one of the things that pushes us forward is that we have hit a scaling limit. And it's not just on spreadsheets, but it's also on people. So if you have a manual person who is responsible for directing traffic inside of your business, they're the person who knows everything and knows who to talk to about different things, there's a limit to their scalability as well. And we also see that expressed because work comes in an uneven fashion. So we'll sometimes have a month of very little work coming in, and then all of a sudden the work surges. Maybe it's Christmas time or New Year's, or we do a lot of work with universities and colleges. So around the time that people sign up for classes or around semester breaks, we see big differences in load on systems. Computers are really good at scaling up and down, much more so than people are. So this is one of those things that drives us towards building a system to take some of this off our backs. And then the final reason is that leadership feels pressure to modernize. Nobody wants to work with those green screen systems that you saw years ago. They want something cool and modern and new. Even if those systems are super efficient, there's still that pressure to get out there and get new systems that are going to be more efficient and friendlier for people to use. Okay, so then we want to talk a little bit
to add to that.
All right. So then we come across this technology investment spectrum. So this is how much money you're going to spend bringing a new system online. So on one end of the spectrum is we just don't do anything. And that's an approach that works for a lot of businesses, and it works very well, is that we are only going to scale the business to a certain level. So I'm reminded of that XKCD comic, which is just a grid of like how much time you are saving multiplied by how frequently you do the operation. And that gives you an idea of how long the payback period is going to be on automating that. So if you have an operation that takes you 60 minutes to do and you do it once a day, then automating that operation is going to save you a lot of time. I mean, it's going to save you 5 hours a week, which is an eighth of your workday. But if that same 60-minute operation is something that you only do every 3 years, so the next step along the way, or rather the other end of the spectrum, is a major system implementation. So some sort of enterprise system that you're rolling out there. It's a custom platform. It's a huge effort. It's going to integrate multiple other systems. It's going to touch every aspect of the business. It's going to involve a lot of different stakeholders. And it's basically going to be like a huge thing to put out there. And then in the middle, we see what we strive for as a company, which is kind of these small incremental improvements that improve your business as you go along. So we're looking to optimize little things that get you wins right away. And it just gets that ball rolling, and you end up improving the entire application or the entire company incrementally with small steps. So the great example that I think of with this one is the British cycling team. So the British cycling team used to be a pretty bad cycling team, but they got a new coach in, and what this coach focused on was small incremental improvements inside of the team. So just looking at little things like, hey, is everybody getting a good night's sleep? Can we spend $20 to get somebody a better pillow so they have a better night's sleep? And maybe that's only going to improve their performance by 0.1%. But if you get enough of these tiny little incremental improvements, they come together and they multiply and they become real significant improvements. And sure enough, the British cycling team, under this coach's tutelage, became dominant and won a lot of gold medals, won a lot of races as a result of these small improvements that just magnified over time. All right. So we talked a little bit about the readiness test. So what we need to do before we're ready to push out a new system. Can we find one place inside of the organization that is a bottleneck? Perhaps it's not the place inside the organization. It's much more likely that there's loads of places that are bottlenecks inside of the organization. But we want to start with finding the one that is causing us the most trouble and kind of start there, the one that's costing us most money. And this is difficult for a lot of businesses because it's hard to know where your time and money are going. 15 hours a week replying to emails. Maybe that's somewhere that we can start our optimization, is to see if there's something that we can do to improve that flow. Who's accountable for that? Is it just one person? Is it spread across a bunch of people? How can we get better visibility into the organization's time management and see where that time is going? And then we also want to know how stable are these requirements. Does stuff change all the time? That's one of the tricky places to automate, is if things change or things are treated differently every time they come in. That's something we want to try and eliminate as much as possible. Humans are really good at adapting to change, but computers less so. So we want to try and make sure that we have something that is easy for us to automate. And then really last one is, how can we measure success here? And typically when we measure success, we're looking at savings or optimizations. How can we make this process better? How can we make it cost less? What is that key metric out there that we can optimize for? And this is like a surprisingly tricky problem to deal with, because we often choose as an organization metrics which, when we optimize for them, end up actually being worse in the holistic view. So think about like a call center where you want to optimize the amount of time that people spend on the phone with customers. Well, if you just pick up the phone and hang it up right away, that is a super efficient optimization. And now you've really optimized for that measurement, but you've destroyed a bunch of other measurements in the process. Something has changed in the last year or two. And what has changed is the massive growth in artificial intelligence. Since the 1950s, we've been promised artificial intelligence is coming, it's going to be amazing, it's going to improve processes. And it hasn't really been until the last couple of years that has come to fruition. It's always been one of those things that's like just 10 years away. Well, those 10 years have arrived now. And it has changed the way that we build. So it means that we can iterate on software much more quickly than we used to be able to do. If we want to build prototypes, even if they're throwaway prototypes, now it is cheaper and easier for us to do that. This is something that we always wanted to be able to do in the past. I'll just throw a quick proof of concept together for this and see if it works. Well, those quick proof of concepts was still taking us 10 or 15 hours to put together, and now they're 10 or 15 minutes to put together. We can automate those so much more quickly now than we used to be able to do. There's a whole plethora of tools out there that allow us to use existing plugins to talk to systems that we already have out there and make the process of working through those systems faster. I mean, we can even get to the point where we're automating people's browsers, even if those systems don't have any sort of an API or an MCP or any way for us to get in and actually change that. And then we also see a big reduction in the time it takes us to build kind of our ready for production solutions. We can get those out the door much faster than we used to be able to do. But at the same time, we don't lose that accountability to make sure that the systems actually work. That still requires a little bit of human intervention to make sure that we're actually building the right things. And that's why we're strong believers in developer-guided artificial intelligence. It's still important to have those people out there to guide AI down the right roads, especially as systems become more complicated. What I'm always concerned about is what I call the Logan's Run problem. If you haven't seen Logan's Run, it's a movie from the 1980s, and it's based in this futuristic city where everybody has sort of forgotten how the city works. So when the city starts to break down, there's nobody who knows how to fix it. And we want to avoid that in the future. Like, artificial intelligence is amazing at building these huge, complicated, productive systems, but you still want to make sure that they're understandable by somebody that can come in and correct it or guide it down the right path.
I thought you were going to talk about how they killed everybody once they turned 30.
I am less of a fan of that part of Logan's Run. The jewels in my hands would be black by now.
Yeah.
And Andy, maybe let's talk about how what we've seen among people that we work with, and what, while AI, is reducing time, but what are some of the examples of clients that might need these architectural guardrails?
I honestly don't even know if it's clients that need those guardrails. I think everybody probably needs those guardrails. There's been some examples like Amazon where they have amazing engineers that are being forced to use AI tools, and they're shipping features into production, and the production systems are going down. And this is like a mega enterprise with lots of amazing processes and the best engineers in theory, and they're tearing their environments down because they are forgetting about what Simon's talking about as far as guardrails and having some experience guide the process. So I kind of like the analogy of treating AI as a really smart new hire who maybe is more on the junior developer side. They can do amazing things, but they don't necessarily always do the right things, which is where the guidance part comes in. And then you extend that to, yes, clients. Clients maybe don't have an engineering team. They kind of know where they want to go, but they don't necessarily know how to get there. They just need additional guardrails on top of the ones that we as implementers probably should follow.
Okay. So finding hidden profit and in automation and really prioritizing and freeing up capacity. What does this look like, Simon?
Sure. So I guess the first thing that we want to look at is just like, where are people spending their time and money? And we've talked about this, but when we're looking for this hidden profit, it is in being more efficient in how your company works and in being able to respond more quickly to changing business needs. We can kind of guess at some of this. So we know that doing this operation, shipping this package, takes a minimum of 15 minutes. And we ship 1,000 packages a week. So just by multiplying those together, we get a little bit of an idea into where we can get those savings. And because it's an operation that we do a lot, it turns out that if we can save 10 seconds, a minute on each one of those operations, it magnifies, it grows. And once we have saved that time, assuming that we can keep that consistent, that goes on forever. So we can continue to see those savings down the line in a year's time. And when we go back and look at it a year later, we can see that we have saved, 52 weeks of 1,000 packages a week, 15 seconds a package. Definitely adds up. I'm not even trying to do that.
Yeah, I think the finding hidden profit, the easy one, is kind of what Simon is talking about, where it's time multiplied by volume. And if we can decrease the amount of time, we make savings. That's probably an easy thing to identify in a lot of companies where there's repetitive action. But the other two types of profit that are interesting is maybe there are missing customer experience processes that people just don't have time to get to. And so you're not necessarily saving time by automating those, but you are increasing customer stickiness, customer happiness, et cetera, just by making sure that these processes happen. Frequently, that might be, your team has 10 things to do every day, and that 10th thing nobody ever gets around to, but it's also very important to the business. So it may not necessarily save time, which means it may not recoup cost, but it may contribute to not losing customers because they like your experience better. The other side is adding new features to a process, or features that maybe are hard to do. Maybe you don't necessarily do them frequently, but if you do them wrong, maybe you lose money there, or again, it goes back to that losing customers. So finding those are equally important. where again, we're not saving time, but we're making sure things get done correctly. And that's a different type of value to a company, which all of these can contribute to profit.
And it's something that can be done in a shorter amount of time, whether, 90 days is actually a realistic timeline to make an impact.
Yeah.
Go on to the next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd now, who is going to show us some measuring of ROI in real time through one of our example dashboards. Okay, go ahead, Todd.
All right, so let's see. Let me start the sharing.
How are we doing on time, Mimi?
We're doing great. We have about 15 minutes.
Okay. So is the dashboard showing?
No, we cannot. Oh, let me, there we go. All right.
Okay. So this is just a very good example of what Simon shared earlier around just doing incremental change as opposed to just complete second order change to change their business. So we had a client that has order flow coming through emails. So they have some turnkey ordering sites. When customers of theirs order from those sites, it'll generate an email, and their customer service representatives would have to go find those emails and then kind of log them. They had a tracking sheet. So it's one of those, they weren't running the business on a spreadsheet. They had an ERP kind of system, and they have some other systems, but their kind of customer order management, kind of their rendezvous point for their employees was a sheet that helps them track which orders are coming in, who's working it, any creatives being done, and then any PO numbers that generate in another system. So about 30% of their order flow for these particular turnkey orders would kind of come through, and they'd manually have to check the email boxes, route them to the correct CSR, and kind of track them. And then another aspect of their business is a lot of drop shipping from third-party drop shippers, which UPS provides a lot of that tracking information. But historically, they were not tracking the shipment details. So if a customer needed to know, hey, has my order shipped, that CSR would have to log into the UPS site, and they could kind of try to track down the PO numbers. So a lot of that information wasn't even being readily available. So what we did is we put together some workflows just as an incremental change as we prepare them to kind of, move away from the spreadsheet and do a much larger kind of change within the business, kind of hit these quick wins. And this is an example where just automating these order flows. So if 30% of your time is spent just doing these turnkey orders, if you can eliminate that 30%, then that frees up that time. That's real world savings for basically this type of items. You save about 5 minutes. And then what value does that provide? So you have cost savings, which is literally like, this would be like labor costs, but then what value does that information provide? So that gives you like another metric. You can quantify what the value is for that. And same for the UPS shipping information. Let's say if it took you a minute or two to go in to find a shipping number and put it in the spreadsheet, and that was all you did that day, was just piecework, putting that together. But then what's that value provide? So, you could quantize that was like, okay, actually having that readily available for a customer, or maybe sending those details to a customer, that provides some actual real value. So when you just look over time, like for example, at the end of January, just the nature of their business, a lot of these turnkey orders were coming through. So you can imagine the lumpiness of the labor for that. So maybe what normally is 30% of their order flow for that particular couple of weeks at the end of January, when everybody's restocking, that maybe is taking 80% of their time. Where now, with just a few automations, we were able to kind of generate, and we kind of put this dashboard together. Andy and I were talking one day after we did these automations, was like, is there a way we can kind of show what you can do? And, we sit down within a couple hours with AI tools to say, hey, let's put together a dashboard where we can track these N8N workflows and see what kind of savings they are. And then you have the AI just tell you, okay, how would we integrate the workflows into this dashboard? And we just in a couple hours, like a tool that you could kind of talk to the client about, like how they're saving money on this. With just in a few hours of using some AI tools, you can put together a real dashboard that kind of shows all their executions, when these order flows are coming in, success rate, how long did it take to run, cost savings and value associated with that. So it gives you kind of all those metrics that you wouldn't even think about putting together on a normal time and materials type project, because to put together a justification application like this, it would take you several weeks. It's kind of like Simon says, where back in the days, you might spend 10 to 15 hours doing a rapid prototype of something. Within a few hours, as a solution architect, when you kind of know what you want, you put the guardrails up that we talked about, you can build these kind of tools that kind of show the value we're providing with these other tools. So
this seems really essential for their business. How did you prioritize, these workflows, and what were the other things that were on the list, before you said this is where we're going to focus our time and energy?
And that's where, when the team first engaged with the client, it was kind of going over their business processes, how these tools can help, but then kind of looking at the bigger picture stuff, right? So the second order change, where you're going to change how they do their turnkey sites, you're going to change how they do their ERP systems. Those are bigger things that you can, with AI, you can do quickly, but historically, those are typically the projects that, might take a year. But with AI, and you can do an incremental change, a lot of these stuffs, now you can really accelerate this, where you can get these big picture ideas. Okay, let's change this. But then you look at optimizing just their processes, right? Any businesses that's using spreadsheets, like Simon says, there's, some magical spreadsheet that could be just like their version of a CRM, or their version of an order tracking, or their version of just what do we have to do today. You can optimize those processes while you start to tackle the bigger challenges to optimize their business, so that you can really scale. Because there's just the way you run your business, if you want to lever up to take on more business, or consolidate more companies, it just doesn't scale either. So it's really, how can you leverage the technology to make their people more efficient? And by just a simple couple workflows, you can remove 30% of somebody's time. I mean, their employees, saving 106 in 3 months, over 100 hours that now they can spend on other tasks, within their business.
Yeah, with this particular client, they had an interesting problem where their order volume started to create problems because it's very human driven. And so if their order volume is such that the people can't keep up, that's where things like the shipping and tracking start to, fall off the radar and just doesn't get done, creates bad customer experience. But they had an interesting thing where, we'll call it orders, but every order that comes in takes the same amount of time from their CSR team, but all those orders aren't the same value. So some of those orders were like, I'm going to order this, low value thing, but it takes the same amount of time for a person to process it. And those orders were also things that kind of had noticeable patterns in them. So we were able to automate those. And what that allows the human side of things to do is go focus on those high order value, make sure there's more of a white glove treatment, make sure the customer is getting the right thing, and take all those, lower value repeatable processes and have, in this case, well, I was going to say have AI do it, but even that's interesting. Todd started with AI. That introduces a cost within the process, because every time you execute AI, you're paying for that. So Todd was able to use AI to solve the problem, but then have AI tell us, how did you solve the problem? Extract the solution out of AI. So now every execution is just code running. That code just happened to be written by AI. So the idea there is that we're, saving execution costs by not taking the easy road and just always letting AI solve the problem, which is good.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left. So let's switch gears to talk about how you can prove value before scaling. This was, example of a company we helped to scale in a very short time. But then how do we prove value and right size your investment? So I don't know, Andy, if you want to jump in on that.
Well, there's an interesting thing here that kind of ties back, I think, to our main point. If you take a very large system and try to replace that very large system with a new equally large system, the thing that happens in software is requirements become fuzzy and muddy. and you inevitably miss steps along the way. And so you get to the new system, it somehow does things differently. This can cause problems with your team, your workflow, your customer experience, et cetera. So this approach of automating small pieces over time, measuring the value, making sure that we're replacing small things with small things, that is a better approach, not always, but most of the time, because we can make sure that we're not introducing unknown change, and we can actually increase value. So value could be time of execution, improved experience, repeatable processes, but make sure it's right before we move on to the next thing. And then what Todd was showing in the dashboard is be able to measure the outcome. So if we think that by doing this thing, we're going to achieve an outcome and we don't, maybe we should spend a little bit more time there so that we can achieve that outcome.
Great. And this is really part of how Inventive approaches our work. And, just a little bit about us is that, we're systems builders and integrators and operators, and with experience in these major implementations, but also incremental modernization. And so, Andy, I'll let you kind of bring us home with a little bit more about what Inventive does.
Sure. And our ultimate experience long before Inventive happened, before we had the concept of product managers, is to take somebody like a Simon or a Todd who has built lots of systems, go into a room, maybe it's a new business, a new industry, hear what their problems are, and be able to quickly visualize what solutions could be and do it in a real-time conversation. The client that Todd was talking to in our first couple of conversations, I think we had a roadmap of 67 small things that we could go and do. We've now done lots of those. Those have actually shown very quick turnaround on adding value. So it's kind of this approach to building software is one where you can try us out, build trust, see that we're actually delivering value, and that tends to be more of a partnership oriented relationship rather than just us being a vendor trying to build more time, build more software. It's very much focused on pivoting your business to being successful. So,
and we've even internally as a company moved from time and materials to more of a retainer based way of working with our clients, because we see the value that bringing value is really our core, the core of who we are.
We're business operators, so we understand that building trust with a stranger takes time. It's not something you do in a sales pitch or a presentation or what have you. So moving to a pattern of operating where you quickly see what we're saying is true, like that makes everybody feel fuzzy. So
cool. Well, if this resonates with anyone watching, we're happy to share how we approach this readiness checklist and dive into maybe some issues that you're having. We can pressure test a situation, potentially in a short working session, or just let's connect and compare notes. We wanted to give you the opportunity to meet us and see what we're about, and hopefully this leads to other conversations down the line.
cool.
Okay, thanks everybody. I might have one question for you. What kind of problems have you seen that maybe don't fit this dashboard style model? Stop sharing so we can see each other. What would be some examples of what hasn't, or what you've sort of consulted against?
For me, there are definitely customers that have come to us with the big platform. I need to rebuild this thing. Sometimes, because I just railed on why that's not a good idea, maybe the vendor of that software is no longer supporting you. You can't hire anybody to work in that platform. We like to talk in terms of MVPs, rapid prototyping, quick deliveries. But if you have a system that your entire business runs on and every single feature is used, and that is the scope of your MVP, sometimes it makes sense to lean on these AI tools to quickly replace it. But quickly replacing could be, so sometimes that kind of model where we just piecemeal fixing things doesn't work. I will say that there's still an approach to do that, which is a strangulation pattern. I don't know, Simon, if you got a new word for that, because that does sound very aggressive, but slowly carving out pieces and replacing and running the two platforms together until eventually you don't have any of the old software hanging around would be the way to do that. But
So
slightly
I think
different.
the pattern is actually called the strangler fig pattern, which
Yeah.
is much less violent.
Oh,
But
okay.
the strangler fig is like a fig plant.
Still does the
that will
same thing,
grow
doesn't
up
it?
around other trees. Yeah, but it's only a tree that's being strangled up.
Yeah.
It's more acceptable that nature is horrible and terrible than humans are. We have the wherewithal to be nice to people and to not be like a fungus that infects ants and causes them to climb up on leaves and then spread fungal spores to other ants.
Okay, I'm gonna hit you with one more question. If I don't control a large budget, but I need a change, where can I start?
Well, yeah, again, we're a small business. We totally understand budget velocity might be your primary concern, and feature velocity may be beholden to whatever that is. We're open to that. We have a couple of scenarios where it's a very small monthly retainer. You get access to Todd or Simon. We solve, a handful of problems that month, and then we go to the next month, and it just takes longer to deliver. But again, if the project is set up in such a way that we can make these small changes with large impact to your business, then budget velocity isn't necessarily a problem.
Amazing. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This has been a great conversation and a good first go for us. So hopefully this is one of many. And
have a good day.